Hello, Mr. Minnick. Teaching Java students how to read data from external data access files. I know that was a mouthful, but let's proceed with this short 5-10 minute video. In Java, you often have these things called client programs, and client programs are full of source code. But there comes a time and a place when your source code needs to interact with and make use of what are called external data files. Now, they do go by different names, and sometimes we just call them files. So, for example, Justin, do you have any questions right now? Good, because I know everybody's paying attention to my screen where I'm waving the mouse, because that's where the action is. So this is source code, and this is a source code file. But at this website, Replit, repl.it, very good online compiler for anybody that doesn't use it, but that's watching this video. In this folder over here, as if it's in the same folder of my computer, which it technically is, besides the main file of source code here, I have 3 other files. Now you can name this type of file anything you want. You can even give it any extension if you even want to put a file extension there. It is very traditional and classic, especially in teaching situations, to name these files .txt file extensions or .dat, which is short for data. TXT typically is the file extension that you would put on a Windows computer text file. And if you're on Linux or Unix or Mac OS, which is really Unix, you can do that just to be simple with the Windows people. Doesn't hurt. But let's look at these separate files. The numbers file has numbers, whole numbers actually, on separate lines. And that's very important to see that and understand it. This file, phrases, has text, we sometimes call it strings, on each line of the file. And I did include spaces, as if this was like a poem or even a short story with like complete sentences. Now, water is one word, but it could have had a space, like perhaps water, spring water. That would be a better example, which I'm going to change it to that, just to make a point. And then my file words, well, it's one word each. And that is very important to understand that difference in the example that we're about to watch. Now, in the real world, you probably only have one of these files. Actually, in the real world, sometimes you have like 10 files. Like you might have high scores, and then you might have like favorites. Then you might have like browser cookies. You might have like encrypted passwords. You'd have different files sometimes to store different types of data. Okay, back to the source code, main.java here. The source code is what you run. You don't run a text file. It makes no sense to run that. That's not executable code. It's generic to the language that you're using. It's agnostic. It's separate from the computer language. I'm happen to be using Java. So over here in main.java, I execute the code. Now this program currently, in its current version, it has 3 sections. It's 3 examples in the price of 1. I have the section where it proves that it successfully got the information. It's called reading data. It got the information from phrases and then echoed it. It printed it to the console output window just to prove that it got this information in this order: Diet Coke first, energy bar second, and spring water third. It's not easy to change the order. And then this section of the output, Arraylist, that's data coming from, you guessed it, individual words, each as a separate record, we say, on separate lines of that file. Maybe that's going to turn into like a Quizlet or some kind of flashcard question and answers quiz program that a Python student would use for their final end of the year game project. Oh no, that wouldn't make sense for Python because they don't have Arraylist. They have something called list, which is actually more like the array. Oh man, They have something called a set. Oh man, it's confusing. Anyway, this is Java. These are Java vocab words. And then my last example over here in the output is proving the fact that I can get whole numbers from a list of numbers that's in a separate data file. Now notice I didn't put any decimal numbers there on purpose, often called doubles or floats. I just kept it whole numbers. I could have done another example called decimal numbers. Maybe that'll come in a future version of this video. Now let's trace through the code to understand why it works the way it does. Well, unfortunately in Java, it's an evil necessity to have to import a bunch of outside libraries from packages and subpackages. So in the package Java, there's a subpackage util, short for utility, and there's a class called scanner. That allows you to make use of the hasNext method, the next line method, the next method, and the next int method that are all referenced down below in various points. And it allows you to create an object that's called a scanner object variable. And so you're obviously allowed to use the scanner class, which is the thing that you're importing. File, I'm not sure what's coming from the input-output file class. It's probably the fact that you can instantiate a file object right here anonymously in this other constructor call statement. And you can also use, that's about it. Then you have to also, as an evil necessity, though I won't put this on a test or quiz, any questions from the front row? I can pause the video. You can, because of the import inclusion of IO exception, I can test for anomalies, what we call corrupt data over here. Oh, I hate people that do this. Well, I don't hate anybody, but I dislike people that sometimes put in like, oh, they have an excuse for everything. They woke up late, so that's why they only got an 80 on the test that day. They told their mom or dad, oh, I woke up late. I wasn't ready for that test. No, you can't put excuses or other extraneous matter, foreign matter, in a chemistry experiment that must be pure. I mean, not chemistry, this is computer science. This has got to be pure, acetone. It can't have a little water in it. It's not going to work right. Keep it sealed. Don't let the moisture in. Okay, back to main.java. So you're forced to handle exceptions if you read data from an external file. Java doesn't let you just wing it. So because of my use of the IO exception object here, which I would never put this on a test in this course, this is just something you have to copy and paste and put in there and hope that it doesn't ever happen. It's like an else. This try catch is like an if else, and the else handles the weird stuff that could corrupt your external data file. So anyway, just to make a note of why you need this stuff, you do have to make use of IO exception if you want this to work. Right off the top of my head, I don't know if Python has an equivalent to that. I could look it up. Forcing us to handle exceptions. It's typically not taught in an intro course anyway. And Arraylist, that's old news. By now, if you're watching this video, your teacher or your homeschool study plan probably taught you that it's always good to use array lists if you want to add things as you go and not know the predefined set size of something. And I do that here. I have a list of phrases, but I don't give it a length like an array would have to have. So I just kind of wing it. See, a lot of times you don't know how many phrases are in this external data file because somebody else, perhaps a clerk, a secretary, or somebody with a sorry but less pay grade than the developer that writes code, got the data in here. Maybe this even came from a Fitbit sensor. Yeah, or some off-brand sensor like the one I have. MyFit, it's a Chinese company that makes a cheaper Fitbit. This is not a sales, but if they want to put me on their Instagram and give me money for pushing their product, just let me know, people that work at the company MI, however you pronounce it. Anyway, back to source code. So this is an adjustable Arraylist, and here's where all the action is in this simple demo program. Right here's where all the action is, this while loop. After instantiating a scanner object that allows you to connect your source code to a specific file one at a time, I'm first connecting myself to the file named phrases. Now don't go around and being sloppy like some students do. They type uppercase letters where they should be exact. See, look, it didn't work. Part of this program didn't work now on the output side. Oh, surprisingly, the rest of it did, because this is not something that's a compile error. This is something that happens at runtime, and basically because I handled that catch, it didn't crash the whole program. Only one customer at the ATM machine was out of luck, but the rest of the day, the ATM machine did supply people with money. Pretty cool. Anyway, assuming that you put the right code in there to create a scanner object, you then can make use of that scanner connection, that file pointer, and this while loop automatically senses, it smells like an insect. It smells where the food is. The fly knows where to land probably because it has a good keen sense of smell. But this has next method is able to cycle through phrases and know when there's something on the next line. So every time that scanner gets to the end of a line after it's read through that, it can like look but not step on the street and get hit by a bus or a car or a speeding taxi. It can sense that there's no traffic. And if it senses that there's no traffic there, it actually stops and doesn't go any further. So in a way, it's sensing if there's more sidewalk left. If it senses that when it's right there, that there's another line, then it does move down to the next line and it reads the whole line. Because look at the code that I'm using here in this demo program. I'm using the available next line method. Not to be confused with the next method from the scanner class. Next takes you to the next blank space. But next line takes you to the next line. It's this is tricky stuff, but if you didn't realize it, there's an enter key press. There's a press of the enter return key invisibly there that gets you from there down to there. That's what humans need. But a computer, it just needs to see stuff like this, \n. In Microsoft Word, they do like a backwards paragraph symbol. Really, they do something else, but the human sees a paragraph symbol. So it's like behind the scenes stuff. It's illusion, I guess, that the audience sees when they watch David Copperfield, the great magician, Houdini. But really, it's explainable. There's a \n there. Well, next line knows where the \n's are. So it segments that data where the human really needs to see it as separate lines, but really the computer doesn't mind it in another way without it. So this add method, comes from the Arraylist class. So that add method automatically adds whatever was read from the next line. I'm just storing this temporary next line variable. I can name that X. See, that could be X and X. This is the name of a method. That has to be next line with a capital L. But this could have been like X and X. And like I said, that has next method just automatically works. I could put a for loop in there, but then I got to know how many phrases there are. Some people do this. They put the number of phrases there as a line, as a number. Then here, they separately read that number as an integer here. Then they use a for loop that goes like for int I equals 0, I less than 3, I plus plus. But then some secretary clerk or outside agent has to always update this if they stock like a smart vending machine with some other type of a product. Anytime they add a line there, they have to do this. And once upon a time, I had somebody that fell asleep during a boring lecture like this, and it was a he. He fell asleep, his forehead hit the space bar, and it stuck in the down position, and this happened. and he didn't even notice. He woke up, hit the run button, and his program didn't work, but everybody else's did. Because guess what? Next line knows that there are like 18 total lines there. And that's corrupt data. And people out in the world, they sometimes don't even realize that. They hit print and they get like blank pieces of paper, and the librarian finds like 500 pieces of blank paper in the output tray of the library shared copy machine. Yeah, that happens. People should clean up their files and do that. I go around and I do this. When I see people do this, I mow their lawn because the lawn's too high. I mow it back to 5 inches. And you know what? I don't like that. That's old school, that 4 thing. I'm going to take that away. And actually, I'm going to put it back to, because I don't want Gatorade in my vending machine. And don't do this either. Don't put blank spaces there. That's just bad style also. Trim that back there. And look, click around to make sure you don't have extra spaces. Now, that space is important because that's like grammar. And don't do this either. Don't put leading spaces in. That's no good either. Then you have to use a trim or a strip function. Nope. Okay, back to, I better save that. Make sure it's saved. Because if you type stuff in and you don't save it, it's not really there in the mind of the scanner. Okay, so any questions? I'm going to go offline in this video, but I just explained that important part of the first part. This scanner is just a necessity to connect to. I have a capital P there. I got to move that back to lowercase p. This is just a necessity. This try catch is a necessity. The bulk of the work is being done by that while loop. Any questions from the audience right now? So the only thing I have left to do in this short demo video is to explain the middle section of the sample client program, where the main difference is I named the variable that the list of words instead of list of phrases. I used the same scanner name. Apparently, the scope of the try catch above is separate from this one. I probably should have named it a different scanner name just to be clear, but it worked, and that's not a big deal. I do necessarily type a different file name here to connect to this file. You can connect to several files at once as long as you have different scanner variables, each connecting separately to a different file. I use the same hasNext method in this outer while loop as the exit condition, the control expression of that indeterminate while loop. But here's a big difference in the middle section. I use the next method, which automatically senses blank spaces or tabs. So check this out. Currently, it's working where I print all 4 words to prove that I'm reading them from the words file. But look at this variation. I'm going to put 1 space between array and array list. I'm going to put arbitrarily 5 or 6 spaces there between array list and while. And I'm going to put a tab key press between the word while and for. So there's a \T there. There's 7 blank space presses there, and there's 1 blank space press there. I'm going to make sure that's saved, and now I'm going to run my program over in main just to prove to you that the next method doesn't go by new lines. It goes by blank spaces or new lines. If I get my 4 words printed out here, I've proven, and I did right there, I proved that the format of your external data file when using next, when you only care about individual words, it only cares about white space. They technically don't have to be on separate lines. Now that's going to confuse a lot of people. So I am going to basically put them on separate lines just to make it easy for people to read this file separately. But it's really any white space. It could have been an Excel spreadsheet where things were in different cells and it was exported as a tab delimited, but not comma separated file. Comma separated file would have screwed it up. The commas would have actually been part of the words. And that is a different video that I'll make. Okay, so that middle section is just separate where you have words. If somebody really wanted to, and they wanted something to be hyphenated, if I did array whatever, that is considered one word because it's unbroken space. So, you can massage that data how you want to if it fulfills your needs as the data entry specialist. Okay, the last example and run through. Any questions, Henry? Please take a look here, Henry, at this last section of my program up here on the screen. Okay, we'll look anyway here at this. I link to the file called numbers, and I use the next int method that's available in the scanner class, but I necessarily store each integer in an integer variable. And that array list is an array list of integers and not strings. And my for each loop that I'm using to print this stuff out. So to echo the output to prove that I'm getting this, the easy way to print an array list is to use an enhanced for each loop. I could have used a traditional for loop where there's like an I++. I chose not to because this is just clean and simple. And a for each loop automatically knows when an array list. Hey, Justin, if you have a question, raise your hand. But a for each loop automatically knows how long a list is. Kind of similar to how hasNext knows when the end of a file occurs. So these are like adjustable flex waistbands, a really handy thing when you're a man of a certain age, and possibly a woman of a certain age, or any age, really. Just nice to have like stretch things rather than like determinate sizes sometimes. So I used a variable that had a better name, nextNum, instead of like next word, but this is just really cool. Now, one last shout out here that's kind of optional. It turns out that an array list, I don't think it can be an array list of primitive data type ints. This is probably going to crash with some kind of data type mismatch error. Yep, but you can put the data type integer in there. That's called a wrapper class that wraps around the primitive data type integer. And right here, but I could have used int sloppily because that's kind of sloppy. But there's something called auto boxing that automatically changes what's read as an integer, and it temporarily stores it in this temporary variable int, but adds it properly without having to do this, because this right here is the formal old school way of doing it. So I'm just going to, for kicks, see if this still works. I think it does. Yep, it works. And I think as of a recent Java update that you can even take away the auto boxing here with, I can take away that new integer and just basically slap nextNum into the container for an integer, kind of like automatic gift wrapping at Boscov's, a local department store here in my area. Yep, it all works. So anybody watching this, there are variations to this that are acceptable. I don't know, email me or comment in YouTube if the comments are turned on if you have a question on that. Have a great day. Hopefully you know how to read data from files. Coming soon, a video called Writing Data to Files.